I was at the local grocery store the other day, walked in. This is yesterday. It's snowing like mad. It's a virtual whiteout and a blizzard there. We don't usually have that weather this time of year. And the guy who's doing some stocking looks at me, and I had to step over him. He had to get up, and he looked outside and looked back at me, and he said, "Well, so much for global warming." And he said, "And that's the last time I'll pay any attention to Al Gore."
Although if
So
you
yeah, the model is changing. Yeah.
although if you were in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, we've had the mildest winters. So it's everything is just weird.
Okay, this is a direct result of the Faction A and Faction B business. Okay, because the reason that I knew that our projections were accurate occurred this past March, actually late February of last year. At some point in the first few days of March, it became evident that this surface feature of the ocean out in the Pacific was starting to go away. It was called the blob. The blob was this area of superheated water in the ocean off the coast of California that extended for thousands of miles, and it created basically a wall, excuse me, a wall of superheated air that kept all the storms out of California. It's been there for about 10 years almost, this blob. And they had created another thing they called son of blob off the coast of Alaska that was starting to create the same effect in uh, uh, a drought up into the Pacific Northwest, all the way up through BC, Canada, and into Alaska. Well, in March of last year, the blob started fading. And that's the blob is gone now, and that's why the weather has changed. So for 10 years, they've redirected all of the storm traffic up to the pole or down to the equator and not allowed it to hit California. And that's why California had the drought. And that's why we had a drought up here. And that's why they were able to claim the global warming narrative was happening. Now it's stopped. So all of the weather that would have hit Chicago, all of the weather that would have hit the Midwest through the East Coast is hammering us on the West Coast now that the blob is gone. And this is like the pent up flow demand that the planet needs in order to balance out the heat. So we've had an extraordinary hot area of the West Coast that, now we've got 24 feet of snow in Tahoe. We're getting snow and rain and stuff here continuously. We've had more snow in Hawaii than Chicago got this year. Hawaii has had blizzard warnings. It is just really coming down to the point where the dams are breaking down in California. Probably the Oroville complex will break down, flood the Sacramento area. Other dams further south will probably go simply because this is not going to stop. Our data sets have shown that winter, especially along the west coast of the Americas, is going to be extend well into spring. So I'm looking at the weather I'm in now, maybe extending into April or May. And if that's the case, and you're going to have that much more additional water coming into even California, you can forget about California produce because the planting season is going to be totally disrupted. Then if the dams go, there won't be any place to plant, and you couldn't drive it out if you tried. Plus, there would be no electricity, and there's going to be a huge move of people trying to move out of California if the Oroville dams go, because all of the diesel fuel is gone, all the gas fuel is gone, and all of the natural gas pipelines are all gone for the northern half of the state. And also the major transmission lines for the electrical power generation from our state down through to Southern California would be gone. So California will become very untenable over this period of time. And we have that stuff in our data sets. So your weather is atypical, and we are basically bearing the brunt of what should have been an evenly spread out winter had it actually occurred. But because of the heat problems, the blob being removed, and this sort of thing, off we go. And that was a deliberate engineering thing. So I knew when it occurred, it was going to be really rough weather-wise, but I also knew we had to do it. We've got to go through this, just as we've got to get rid of the chemtrails. And we'll have to go through probably 10 really nasty years or more as a result of those things going away.
Where can people find information about those blobs? You
You
know?
can just look it up, blob Pacific Ocean or son of blob. And it's a meteorological thing. That's what they called them. That's what the meteorologists called them because they couldn't understand them. Because the meteorologists are not woo-woo guys. They don't understand conspiracies. So they weren't looking at HARP activity. They weren't looking at some of these other electrical generation, auroral kind of things. And so they didn't conceive of it as being a man-made thing. So they tried to cram it into their model as a natural occurring event, which it was not. And so that's why a lot of our models are screwed, is because they are looking at things and saying, oh, that's a natural thing, when indeed it was not. It was created by a bunch of people in Alaska.
How interesting is that? Okay, so what does it say about the center of the country, like where I'm living in the Twin Cities? Is it going to keep having mild weather for a long time?
Yeah, but there's you're going to have some downsides to that. Exceptionally stormy and very hot. There's going to be the humidity issue, and then also there's likely to be radiation problems because bear in mind all the radiation that's airborne from Fukushima at the moment is blowing across the top of the storms and stuff that are hitting us and heading towards the Midwest part of the country. How long this will continue, I don't know. How far it goes in there, I don't know. But it's not coming down here. Any that comes down here is just washing out in the rain as it is anyway. But we know that the higher level radiation clouds are being tracked by air airline companies now because so many of their staff are coming down with radiation associated problems. And so you can actually get more of this information out. And so there's that part. So you guys will have a really nice, interesting kind of a period of time. We're going to have some more polar vortexes that are going to come down and they're going to interfere with spring planting in the Ohio Valley region. How far down they'll go, I don't know. And then after that, it should be reasonably pleasant for you guys while we're still getting hammered by the storms out here. But then we have the seismicity issues of this year and for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I expect a really big earthquake to hit that may affect most of the country this year.
Well, and you're talking about massive floodings and maybe inland lakes.
Inland seas,
Inland
not lakes.
seas, bigger than
Right,
lakes. Yeah.
correct. And that'll be like the all the areas that have been fracked in Oklahoma, Texas, all over. If they get hit by a big earthquake, our data sets are showing that the the fracking network, if you will, collapses into like this bowl, and it causes a bunch of rivers to want to dump their water into now the new low area, and so we actually get rivers that change their course.
And all go in and create new seas. Another thing
Correct.
that you mentioned is, aside from food shortages and massive flooding, you're talking that the younger people were going to be very angry because what they've been told hasn't been true.
Yeah, exactly, because they've been sold this idea of the global warming and all of the lies for, the it's not the kids that are 8 years and younger because they've sussed it all out. It's those that are like say 8 to 20s, right? That sort of bought into the whole mythos of these past few years, and they're going to just get really upset as they start digesting the level to which they've been deluded deliberately. So that's what's going to really irritate them, really piss them off, is the fact that it was done deliberately.
And the young people are going to backlash, which is what you see with young people when they want to fight the powers that
Mhm.
be. Okay, you also talk about massive migration into Europe and the invasion of immigrants. What, and 10 times the amount. What is that showing?
Well, we're running into what's called pop war, okay, war between the populations. The migration movement into Europe, there's a natural tendency towards that in any case over the years since the 60s out of the Middle East, but it's been paid for recently by George Soros and his people, and that's caused some of the big problems, and he's still going to attempt to re-engineer some of that. The social contract within Europe by moving in a migrant basis. And why and he's doing this, I have no idea. It's just this is what our data sets are showing, that there's going to be this big impetus of yet more people that will try and cross over. That's going to change. And the flow will reverse over these next couple of years. It's not going to be a pretty time, and it's going to be basically indigenous population has just had it, and the social breakdown, the breakdown of the welfare state is going to hit everybody. And so once it's on for a resource war, then those people that don't have any attachment to the area are going to simply move out because it'll just be too nasty to try and survive there.
Is it all Islamic type immigration from them?
Sure,
Because they have this plan to take over areas by immigration.
sure, and that's called Dar es Islam. It's global Islam. The problem with Islam, I mean, it's in, all religions are delusionary at many different levels, but the problem with Islam, there's one big fundamental flaw with it. And that fundamental flaw is that it encourages marriage and breeding between first cousins. and will even tolerate closer relationships. And so that has led to the horrific level of special needs children within the Islamic community. Because after now 55 generations of inbreeding, we have well, the statistics are just horrid. Before the Islamic invasion of Denmark, there was one special needs child per 1,000 children in the school system. After the first year of the inclusion of North African Muslim immigrants in the school system, there were 353 special needs children per 1,000. Almost
Wow.
352 of them were immigrant. And so it's even worse. And if you look at the statistics, it's like, this is a harsh statement about Islam. They are not creative. They don't produce. Well, and you can say that this is not true. And I can say, well, all of the Islamic world, 1.2 billion people, will not write nor translate anywhere near half of the books that Liechtenstein will translate this year. So and write this year. So small countries that are not Muslim are outproducing the entire Muslim world of the planet in creativity, and this I put down to the inbreeding, and also the restrictions against creativity within Islam. So
It's a lot of it's cultural, is what you're saying.
No, a lot of it's
Inbreeding.
prohibited by the religion,
Yeah.
by the
Okay.
religion
Yes.
itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so it actually prohibits you from doing any kind of art expression other than geometric by the very way in which it defines art and its relationship to their version of God and so on. So creativity is explicitly suppressed in all of these different areas within the Islamic culture. And of course, you don't see Rastafarians running around destroying 1,000-year-old Buddha statues, right? This sort of thing, or old pyramids that offend Islam. And so they're a touchy people, and they are inbreeding, and neither of those go towards making them good global citizens. This is going to come back to affect Islam. It is even doing so now. And we also have some stuff about it, the Islamic world, that the warfare that's going on between the Yemenites and Saudi Arabia is going to lead to battles within Saudi Arabia, the destruction of the Saudi Arabian monarchy, and maybe the destruction of the holy relics in Medina and Mecca.
Oh, that'd be
And so
terrible.
that's going to really upset the both the balance of power and the direction within the Islamic world over these next few years.
When you were talking about the inbreeding, the children that have special needs, what kind of special needs are you talking about? Are you talking just learning disabilities? Or are you talking hardcore problems?
Oh, the whole thing. I mean, people that are, basically require four adults, fully trained adults, to get them through a day at the school. So that level of special needs child. And the reason that I know this is because of the surveys you can do on the amount of money that the school systems are spending throughout the EU, because the EU, of course, is a unelected bureaucracy that has to keep busy, so they keep vast amounts of statistics which they put on the internet. So you can start looking at it from a monetary viewpoint as to how much these individual countries are spending on special needs children within their schools, tie it to the immigration, and watch the escalation go up several hundreds of thousands of percent because they were unprepared for it. In Denmark, they're even now having to build facilities like, whole new schools, and have to buy the short buses, this kind of a deal. So they've actually had to invest capital expenditures. And so you can track all the monetary expenditures here. And it's not just simply supplies. It's not just learning difficulties. It's everything. And Denmark was a good case. Some of these countries have seen escalations that take them up into the 700s per thousand in their
Jeez.
regions.
Well, it's
Yeah,
just
and
so
they're
amazing that they can't look and say, okay, let's make it illegal to marry first cousins and anything that is causing this. Just let's
That's because,
be
that's
smart.
because Mohammed said it, and therefore it's allowed. Now, Mohammed also married a girl when she was 6 and took her as wife when she was 9. So Mohammed, in my opinion, was a pedophile, and I could be killed in many Islamic states for making that statement. But it's factual. So, a lot of people are not self-examining. Islam is not, particularly in this current state, a self-examining religion, and it needs a reformation, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it creates massive problems in society, you got to look at it smart. Yeah, I,
Yeah, however, let's also state that, Catholicism and Christianity
yes,
is in no way better, except that they don't allow the inbreeding. They're still murderous, the Spanish Inquisition, the rape of the Americas, killing 16 million people in
exactly.
the first 20 years of the occupation of the country, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can't sit and point fingers.
Right.
It just let's be smart here, guys. And I, probably like you, I have a lot of friends who are from that area and different things, and they're pretty smart, intelligent, educated people. So I think there's a more of, and I had a really good person who was from the Middle East just came on my show a couple shows ago, and saying, there's more and more people that are being Harvard educated and educated in the States, and just and then bringing that back to the Middle East. So there is a lot that is starting to change there because they're they're educating themselves. And I know you're not into formal education, but it's different than what they're getting now just in those madras. And
And that's the key, I think, is the education as opposed to the schooling. And they exactly. So the the internet is having its working its
yeah,
magic at a cultural level
exactly.
there as it does for all of us.
Exactly. So things are starting to evolve because people are people no matter where you're from.
Correct. Right. We're all raspy, and you can't wake us up on the wrong side of the bed, and you'd better have that coffee ready, and so on. Yeah.
We're all a bunch of idiots.
Right. Right. And
So
we're lucky we made it this far. So I know universe favors
exactly.
favors humans. So we've got progress ahead of us.
Exactly. So, a couple other things. I have to get into Antarctica, but before we get into that, I want to ask you a little bit more about what does an ice age coming mean? What is when is it going to start, and
It started last year, really.
what does that mean? Okay.
Well, it means colder falls, fall starting earlier, spring starting later, colder, deeper winters, longer springs that are colder and wetter, and summers with less sun. It means planting seasons that are shorter. You're planting later and having to harvest earlier. It means erratic weather, so that maybe you have to protect your crops in ways you didn't have to in the past. Um, it doesn't mean giant glacier pushing on your town in 2 years. It may mean, though, that you're living in Kazakhstan, and for the first time in your life, you have to tunnel from your house into to get out of your house into any other house and join the common tunnels that are the roads. And it may be that that snow does not go away this summer, and that you have to abandon your house and move out next year because a glacier is going to form in that particular region. So, and it won't be a glacier yet, but it'll be 35 feet of snow that you have no way of coping with. And so you'll take what you can and struggle out and be rescued, and then try and create a life elsewhere. So that's an ice age. An ice age is also giant amounts of water being evaporated out of the ocean that have to go somewhere. And they'll go to the land and come down as precipitation in the form of snow, rain, sleet, and everything we could possibly think of. And then some of it's going to stay as snow that'll keep over through the summer and add more to it the next year, and so on. But much of it will come down as rain, saturate the ground, and cause all different kinds of other associated problems, everything from flooding to mold issues, but also earthquakes as vast quantities of water get on land that's not used to it. And so drought conditions will go away in some areas, but will be intensified or created in other areas as the precipitation patterns change. Because, like, for instance, right now, California may well be on its way to filling up the Salton Sea and the giant inland sea that's the Sacramento Valley area. And that may be happening because the rain level from the Pineapple Express is not going to be able to make it over the mountains. What we would think of as the monsoon season to hit the Southwest may dump most of its water in California because of the new supersaturated air, atmospheric rivers being so heavy with water that they actually can't make it into the middle of the country. So we may see that everything from the Mississippi Valley all the way up through St. Lawrence dries out quite precipitously over the next few months, and then gets into its own little drought area, which everybody will think, oh, a nice pleasant summer and so on, until we get into fall and there's no rain. And then if we get the earthquakes and the rivers start changing, it'll be quite an interesting period of time here in the U.S. Now, the rest of the world is going to experience ice age as more ice on the North Pole, which is already happening. The Russians have gotten a couple of their ships stuck this year. It'll also be more ice in Antarctica, although we're going to get a lot of Antarctic ice breaking off because the ice appears to be shifting over and is going to be hanging onto the continent, but floating off on a new part of it. On the other side of the mountain. So it's going to be very diverse, but you will see it in food prices and food availability first, and then you may see it in energy prices. It's just going to depend on where you're at.
Well, are there going to be parts of the world that are actually going to be calmer and warmer, and then other areas that are going to much more areas going to be colder?
Sure, it'll actually it has to even out. So we'll see more areas of the planet. We'll see an equal amount of the planet become warmer as larger areas become colder. And this has to do with this 420-year cycle relative to our orbit going ever so slightly elliptical that causes the heat distribution on the planet to change. So usually we have these storms come across from Africa that hit the East Coast that we call hurricanes. And the planet doesn't call them hurricanes. It just uses those things to move heat from the equator up to the North Pole. And there's typhoons and cyclones that do the same thing in the Southern Hemisphere as well, and in the Pacific. And these storms have been absent the past few years, you'll notice. We haven't had huge, giant, really terrific seasons of dozens of hurricanes. It's been just this weird pattern. And those kind of things are going to change. And so we'll get storm patterns, but at the same time, these storms are going to be hauling up all kinds of water. So we'll actually get new land. So at some point, we'll have a land bridge that will connect India to Sri Lanka. We'll have land bridges that will connect the islands again in the Indonesian archipelago. And maybe New Zealand will discover new land and so on as water evaporates and the sea levels lower. And this is already occurring as more and more glaciers are created. And we've had, for instance, snow in the summer in New Zealand this year, snow in Australia this year. In the summer, we've had new glaciation forming in central Eurasia along the Russian side of the steppes. So there's already starting to lock up some of the water. And it'll escalate as we go forward. So it'll actually increase year after year after year in the amount of land showing up and the amount of water being locked up in new places on the continents, including inland seas, that will reduce the ocean levels. And so those places will be warmer. Central America ought to be really nice. Some of the areas that in the tropics ought to be less humid and be much more pleasant to live in year round. So there will be many places that will be benefiting, but some places will be an awful lot colder, a lot wetter.
So are there going to be, if the ocean levels are going to go down a bit, is there going to be exposed cities and things that from the past? Because I know that there's a lot of ruins that are under the ocean. Are those things going to be exposed?
I don't know that we're going to have that much of an ocean drop that people, and it won't happen in my lifetime, that it would be that dramatic. So our data sets don't reference any of that. I wouldn't expect that we would lose that much oceanic water, but we do have stuff in our data sets showing that there's going to be problems for ships at ports, for instance, because there won't be enough tidal flow to get them into some of the inland ports. So there are a lot of port areas might just simply disappear because there isn't enough water in the river, or the river changes course, or the ocean level is down just enough that the tide doesn't come back far enough to carry the big boats in. So there will be major changes at that level within my lifetime. But we don't have anything that's saying, for instance, that, the vast cities off the coast of India are going to be uncovered. No.
We also talk about aircrafts freezing in mid-flight.
That's going to be weird. Yeah, we've got that. The first time ever showing that up, that it's going to be one of these atmospheric rivers, only instead of coming down as water, either the plane's going to be cold or there's going to be some kind of a freezing event, and a giant ice cube with an airplane in it's going to plummet to the ground.
Have we had anything like that happen already?
Not that I'm aware of, no. So far, I haven't seen it come in, and I would presume it'll be just so dramatically bizarre that it'll go around the internet real quick, and I haven't seen it. So I suspect, by the way, that this is probably later this year after August.
Wow. Okay. So what about your wine dark seas from a solar spectrum shift? What is that?
Okay, so this is really a spooky kind of a thing. It used to be that the oceans were a different color. Okay, we know this because of all of the cultures that now you can call a color red. Well, actually, no, you could because we've got this gender issue. Male red is not the same as female red. But if we were talking about everybody trying to agree on a color, we used to have a situation where the seas off of Greece were the color of what you and I might think of as a very dark Cabernet. All right, they're very much a wine dark
Mm-hmm.
purplish color. They were not blue. This is referenced in India. This is referenced in ancient Sanskrit. It's referenced in all these languages all throughout the seafaring peoples, even going into Polynesia, where the oceans were a different color, and the Egyptians even recorded this. And this is as recent ago as 3 or 4 thousand years ago. It was a different color, and it wasn't that the oceans changed color. And it wasn't that the human eye evolved in any way. It was what was going on at the time was that there was a different kind of spectrum of light that we were getting in different intensities. And we've got one of those things occurring now. Now, in that past period, there were some small discussions in Chinese about the sun changing color, but very, very few. And so it was not as noticeable as the discussions we've seen in the 90s as our sun faded from yellow and became white. Now I think because of what's being forecast, we're going to have another solar spectrum shift occur. It may or may not cause a change in the color of the sun, but it will alter the color as we perceive it here on the planet Earth. So that's going to be really weird because a lot of people are going to take it as like a Mandela effect, CERN or evil
Yeah.
people are manipulating color and stuff, but it's just going to be a natural occurrence as a result of the light frequencies shifting and our reaction to them.
And when do you think that'll happen?
I think it'll probably be a lot more gradual, and we'll just sort of, oh, hey, it's happened, but it's within the long-term data, so within the next 19 months.
Wow. Okay, let's get into Antarctica a bit. There's thawing going on. Right, there's more ice on one side, but thawing on the other.
Correct. There's a Antarctica is shaped sort of like a plate, and about two-thirds of the plate is separated from the other one-third by a mountain range. And the two-thirds of the plate is the part that's getting more ice, and the one-third is the part that's losing its ice.
And it's exposing ruins.
Correct. All different kinds of really cool stuff.
What are the cool stuff it's exposing?
Well, pyramids that are bigger than anything we can imagine. A pyramid that is so big right now, it's estimated that it may be 30 times the volume of the big pyramid in Giza. And we're seeing buildings that, or what are coming through the ice as giant forts or military installations. We're seeing stuff coming through the ice now that are stairways, but these are not stairways like for a house. These would be like stairways for the Capitol steps in D.C., only they're about 6 times as large. And the stairs are actually perhaps built for beings that are much taller than us. So for somebody that was maybe tall as maybe 19 or 20 feet, because from the perspective we're getting now, the stairs are clearly evident, but they're also clearly twice as the rise is twice as tall as a man is.
So it looks like they're steps made for somebody who might be twice as big as us.
Correct, or bigger than us by twice. Yeah. So yeah, we don't know what that is. Now it may be that we're looking at a structure that these are recessed building tops and they're actually built for people our size, but because we can't see the building, we take them as steps, but just as the ice is retreating. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff coming out. But it's very interesting what's being revealed relative to the pyramid aspect of this alone, because there's a lot of these pyramids throughout Antarctica.
Well,
There may be thousands as far as we know, but we're certainly able to identify a couple of dozen now.
now is this coming into your data sets, or are you also talking to people that are seeing it?
I'm getting all kinds of stuff where people are sending me confirmation of stuff that I started talking about in the data several months back, in early last year even. So I'm getting it from both parts of it. I screen out any of the stuff that's sent to me, and that's why you'll notice that the reporting on this stuff out of Antarctica is relatively sparse this month, because there just wasn't that much new stuff within the data sets. Now, secondary to that, I've had a lot of people that have contacted me, some people that were scientists, and one guy was a cook. He was down there and he'd just finished a tour down there working for 8 months, and he was able to tell me a few things. So a lot of people are saying that, yeah, I was down there and some weird stuff's going on. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, is it all being hidden? Can people go there and actually see it, or are they not letting the government not letting
No,
people in?
you can't actually go to Antarctica. It's not open. In order to get there, you have to be approved by the military to go to Antarctica. There's a military council that rules Antarctica, and even people from the United States, yeah, they let, Newt Gingrich in, that kind of thing. But us guys, the only way you could get there would be through an official tour, and they'll do a background check and stuff on you before you get down there. That's my understanding. The guy who was a cook was hired. I won't go into any details, but he was a real good cook. He was hired specifically to go and brighten people's days up, so to speak, with good quality food and stuff. And he knows they did a background check on him before he actually got the job, because they actually had people show up and talk to his former employers, and the word got back to him. So there is still some level of background checking that's going on at that level, but I think it's busting open simply because of the amount of jobs that are available that you can find for Antarctica. So if you're a young person and you want to have an adventure and make some money, look for jobs in Antarctica. There's a lot going on down there.
Wow. And then you'll be able to see all this stuff.
Be able to see whatever they let you see. That's the problem, right? You're under very tight constraints down there. On your off hours, maybe they let you go on out and look around, but they're not going to let you hop on a snowmobile and take off into the high country.
And that's where it is. I mean, the camps are away from it enough where you won't be able to find it.
Probably so. The way in which you can look at this, you can get on Google Earth and you can, what I call crawl. You can go down to the coast of Antarctica, get a good visual distance, and then just move the coastline underneath your view. And you see that most of the installations are still along the coast. And vast areas of the interior part of Antarctica are deliberately whited out by Google Earth. So we don't know what's going on there. So I suspect any of those areas are you're not going to be allowed to go to. Plus, we also know that there's basically a no-fly zone in Antarctica, and very narrow, tight, constrained areas where they do allow some level of flying. And they don't want those pilots stepping outside of those areas. And I've had one of the pilots contact me and basically tell me the trouble he got into when he was forced out of his flight area by a problem with the helicopter he was flying, and how it was he said he would rather crash than go through that.
Wow. So you also talked about in another show that there were tunnels in Antarctica because there's rivers that are hotter.
Correct. Antarctica's got at least, as far as the Germans cataloged in the 1939 expedition in New Schwabenland, they found 9 rivers where the temperature coming out was 60 degrees or higher in Fahrenheit. And they found 9 of these rivers that had carved giant tunnels out in the ice because of the hot water. And so and it's volcanic, geothermal hot water all throughout Antarctica. And New Schwabenland is a nice big area of Antarctica, but we can just presume that it's that way all around the whole continent. So there's probably thousands of these. And the Germans used these to take their submarines into these giant caverns. But there's now a couple of these things that are being exposed. That's the rumor, on the coast in the Weddell Sea, which is the side that's losing the ice. And so a couple of the people that have returned have told me that, yeah, they're saying that, hey, that you can really see something. And there's a lot of activity. And the one guy says, I swear that I saw steel doors in that giant ice there. And they came along and dynamited the ice to bring it down to cover up whatever it was that they were trying to cover up.
Oh, geez. So if they have all these rivers that are carving caverns, that would be huge. It could be huge caves and huge things. You could actually, like they were saying, there's metal doors. You could actually have buildings and structures and all sorts of things in there.
Sure. Actually, there are some surveys and assays that went on in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. You can still get at, and a couple into the early 80s. There was a particularly interesting period in, say, 76 through 79, data that's come out. Also, curiously, some of it in the previous CIA dump, not Vault 7, but the previous one that they did that relates to Antarctica. And they did some surveys. And then one of the caverns that was caused by the warm water, where the water was 72 degrees. And there's this picture, I don't know if you can find it anymore, of these people inside this ice cave. They've taken off all of their gear and they're playing around in the warm water, and you can see the sort of little steamy bits of the water, but you can see the ice cave behind them. And in some of these caves, they surveyed one, and you could have stacked 5 Eiffel Towers in it and
Wow.
reach the top of it. So yeah, quite the sizable area in there. The river part of it had heights that were on the order of about 210 feet over the surface of the river itself were carved out.
Yeah, because you could have lots of stuff in there. Well, you also say official sources will be releasing or secrets will be released. Is it, does it have anything to do with this stuff?
That's what the data seems to suggest, that a confluence of events of the depression we're in, the need to try and consolidate the faction B, win whatever is pressuring the deep state to have its fracture now and its battle now, because there's something external to that that's causing it, whether fear of space aliens coming or what, I don't know. But something external to that caused faction B to decide they had to do it now. And so all of this is going to go on, and I think that Faction B is going to start releasing this technology as part of their weapon against Faction A, and as part of their attempt to get us to up-level our economic problems beyond occupation by the evil banks.
Well, and you said that there's a lot of fear. Is there a lot of fear amongst both A and B factions?
Yeah, the fear in Faction A is different, though. Faction B has a fear of something that's external to them, that's like existential sort of a fear. They don't particularly fear losing the battle with the Faction A, right? They just know they're in a war and they're just going to keep slogging on. Faction A has fear at that level of the existential threat, but they also have their linguistics are tainted with this personal fear of basically personal fear of death and personal fear of ego death at the level of the pedophiles and the operating structure of Faction A. So, for instance, the royals in Britain are desperately afraid that the citizens of Britain should ever find out that they're pedophilic cannibals and that this has been going on for centuries. They just don't want this kind of thing exposed. And so there's that level of fear, and that they should have it exposed because it alters everything. And so that level of fear is actually greater in the emotional intensity within Faction A than the fear of individual death.
So you also talk about mass chaos starting in March, government sit-ins and protests. Have it already started or are?
Sure. It actually sort of started with the secrets revealed that even came out today with the CIA,
Yes.
with this next tranche that came out as to how they're pulling all this stuff, and how if they wanted to, they could cause your car to crash by taking control of the chips and, ramming you through that intersection just in time for the cement truck to hit you.
So we've covered so much stuff. So what was new to you that was like, wow, this is amazing that that came out in this new report?
Uh, it had to be the perceptual shift in my own head as to what's going on with why things are occurring the way they are. So, in other words, I had not tumbled in the linguistics until this past report that humans are actually evolving beyond the ability of Faction A to win. So, in other words, the tools that Faction A are trying to use are the tools they've used for hundreds of years, and we're now immune. It's as though enough of us have gotten the immunity virus of woo-woo that we've got immune systems that just don't take that stuff anymore. And I was shocked as to how prevalent it has become and how rapidly it's expanding.
We're just evolving as humans, and so they can't control us anymore. And
Correct. The awakening wave is sweeping through us so fast that, and it's combinoric. It's compounding upon itself. So maybe in a couple of years I'll be out of business because there won't be any need, which is
I
great.
doubt it. I think people are going to be listening to this more. I think it's really fascinating, and with the data that's coming out, it's just going to be more people trying to do it, right?
Correct. I believe that that's the case. Yes.
And they'll have different ways that they look at it and different things that they look at. But this is absolutely amazing. It's really fun to talk to you. I want to thank you so much for meeting with me, and you're not meeting with me, but sort of over
But
the
yeah,
internet and talking to me. This is great.
yeah, sure. Glad to do it. Yeah, it's fun.
And if I can have you, I'll have you back when you get, as you do these different reports.
Sure. We'll try it again this next month. I'm trying to work it out here to get some major projects done here, so I may have to be spotty in interviews for a while, but we'll settle back in here this year for sure.
Okay, well, great. Well, you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Very nice to talk to you. Thank you for having me. Lovely conversation.
I
And I will have
love
a good
it.
day.
Okay, talk to you later.
Bye.